And hello, everybody. I'm Dan Haggerty. Welcome back. Let's have a discussion about the news for just a moment. I'd like you to email me at dan@wral.com if you have some thoughts. Do you trust me? Wow, that's a nice way to get started, don't you think? I mean, you are supposed to trust me. I'm a journalist after all, but honestly, I know that most of you don't. I mean, not fully anyway. I mean, people today are pretty wary of the media or anybody in power trying to tell them the way it is. So I'm always trying to think of ways to gain your trust. The Harvard Business Review published a brief list in 2019 that I like a lot. It had the 3 elements of trust. Number 1, positive relationships. Number 2, good judgment through expertise. And number 3, and my personal favorite, is consistency. That's a big one for me. That's one that I think's gotten us into a lot of trouble during this pandemic, specifically with messaging consistency. Now, if you don't know what I mean by that, here's a tweet that I saw yesterday that I think really sums up the current state of messaging consistency. It says, stay indoors, but also return in person. Wear a mask, not that one, the expensive one, the one you can't find. Take rapid tests, which you also can't find. But if you find them, don't buy them. Rapid tests don't work. You need PCR. There are 0 appointments in your area. There's the tweet in all its glory. Now, it's kind of funny. I laughed when I read it, and then I started to think to myself, except it's true. When you're constantly getting information from both sides of someone's mouth, how do you know what to believe or who to trust? See, Forbes did an article about this danger of mixed messaging from trusted entities like the CDC and the White House, and how that confusion can open the door to misinformation. They interviewed a crisis management expert who said, if there's one hard and fast rule in crisis communications, it's consistency is king, and details matter. So with that, why don't we turn to the Devils for a moment? This week, Duke students began the spring semester virtually, even though they're fully vaccinated. A message over the holidays went out and told them to plan to do that until at least January 18th, which makes a lot of sense. We've seen tons of schools go that route because of Omicron. But Duke, their policy has this little caveat, this asterisk. You see, while vaccinated students aren't allowed in the classrooms, they're still allowed to fill Cameron Indoor Stadium for Duke basketball games. The number 2 ranked Blue Devils play Georgia Tech on Tuesday. They host Miami on Saturday. Fans shoulder to shoulder, screaming themselves raspy. They're supposed to be in masks, but look at the video. Not everybody's in masks. Meanwhile, finance students are forced to log into the class that they're attending from their childhood bedrooms. A graduate student at Duke told us he thinks it's the university's way of saying that basketball is more important than the curriculum, and he's got a great point. That interpretation is completely understandable.
I have a hard time justifying a $140,000 MBA program when I spend almost 66% of it off campus.
I asked Duke for an explanation, but they declined to comment. I asked them pretty please, saying this is a clear contradiction in policy, but they never got back to me. But to be frank, I don't really care if they prioritize basketball. Maybe you do. I don't. I mean, I don't go to school there. Most of you don't either. I'm more interested in their take on COVID. Duke and its researchers and doctors and healthcare workers, they have been a global example in mitigating the spread of this pandemic since it began. We hear from their experts almost daily, a lot of times on our air. So, are vaccinated students safe enough to be inside together or not? I mean, classroom or courtside, it shouldn't matter. COVID doesn't care who Coach K is. Either Duke is being too lax with COVID safety at games or too strict with it in the classrooms. It's one or the other. If it's worth the risk to see jump shots, why not to see people solving equations? In fact, I'd argue it's more important to foster a great engineer than a great power forward. And literature across the board is finding that restrictions in our classrooms are hurting our engineers and all of our other students. An economics professor at Brown published this article yesterday in The Atlantic. Universities need to catch up to the post-vaccine reality. Remote learning hurts students. She describes the rise in anxiety and depression, with the top issue being loneliness and isolation. She explains the current risk factors for serious cases of COVID in students, which for vaccinated, college-aged people is extremely low, especially with the Omicron variant, which is what spurred all of these new restrictions recently. Again, I don't care about the priorities at Duke. I like basketball, but let's admit, what's good for the game is also good for a game developer. COVID doesn't distinguish, so why is Duke? Consistency matters with messaging. Yes, Duke is a private school. Yes, this involves students, staff, and Duke families. No, I am none of those things. But the community looks to Duke and institutions like it for guidance during unclear times. The LA Times even profiled Duke earlier in the pandemic as a place that schools the country on how to stay open during the pandemic. What Duke does matters. And I'm not really sure what they're doing. Let me know what you think. Email me your thoughts at dan@wral.com.